Hi, I'm licensed IO psychologist Dr. Clif P Lewis, and this is a public service announcement to tell you to eat the rich. Roll intro.
We don't want to get sued, so we're going to be like super vague. First mistake.
How are you a manager and unable to deal with conflict?
If nothing else, I'm balanced.
Welcome to Management Tool, the show where we talk about psychology, employment, and management, where my esteemed guests and I talk about what you're doing is wrong. On the show today, I have my dear friend and esteemed academic, Dr. Rashné Limki. Hello, Rashné.
Hi.
Okay, that's your cue.
To say what? I said hi. Did you not hear me?
Is there a delay?
Maybe. No, I don't
Oh,
think
no,
so.
I didn't hear the first time.
Oh.
Okay, because when I was doing Eranjan's episode, there was a terrible delay. So,
Not on my end. There might be on yours. I
Rashné,
don't know.
welcome.
There is a delay.
Okay, thank you for joining me on my little podcast. Yeah, we're gonna have to. So, as I always start with my guest's bio, and you have a very impressive bio. Usually, I just pick out the most sort of pertinent points, but your bio is so beautifully written. Like, it's not like a bio, it's like a biography bio. So I'm gonna read the whole thing.
It's
'cause
an
I really like it.
anti-academic
So
bio.
also when I was right, it's really nice. When I was poking around on your LinkedIn, I realized that I've been saying your name wrong for all these years.
Welcome to
I've
the
always been calling you
club.
Rashné, and I think that was because that's how Miriam says your name. And so I always just been doing Rashné, and I think your bio says it's pronounced Rashné. So yeah, my white mouth apologizes. So I was trying to get it right now. Rather late than never, right? Let's quickly get up into this bio gig. So Rashné is an engineering student turned politics major with legal aspirations, turned race and ethnic student scholar, turned work and organization studies researcher. She comes to Edinburgh, where she now works, from Bombay, from Bombay, not Mumbai, from Bombay via Oberlin, Ohio, San Diego, California, and London, UK. It has been a convoluted journey that somehow makes perfect sense. Along the way, she has picked up a love of writing and held onto a commitment to justice. She is currently employed as a lecturer in work and organization studies at the University of Edinburgh, where she is also director of equality, diversity, and inclusion, co-convener of the Edinburgh Race Equality Network, and migrant officer for the migrant officer for the Edinburgh University and College Union. Her academic thinking and writing focuses mainly on the ethics and politics work. In particular, she is interested in the role of race and gender in the emergence and distribution of new forms of work technology. More broadly, she is interested in the role of I can't say that. How do you say that? Coloniality?
Coloniality.
How do you say that?
Coloniality.
Coloniality in the world as is. Okay, cool. Wow. That was in my ear. And the possibilities for decolonization. That gives me a lot of anxiety because Dr. Limki and I are writing a paper together, and I'm holding up the process, and one of the themes is decolonization. So I will try and push that down so that we can get through this episode. Beyond her academic commitments, she has worked as a facilitator and mediator for community and activist organizations with a particular focus on anti-racist and migrant justice. So you must be continuously pissed off, right? given like migration laws and stuff.
Yes.
I can see you. I'm looking at a
Yes.
spreadsheet. Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Not cool, but she was recently appointed as board member for Shakti, a domestic violence organization in Scotland that supports and advocates for women of color and migrant women survivors. That is a bio. And also, I feel very fortunate, even though I did bully you in attending this podcast with me, as I did all my other smart and talented friends. So, thank you for giving in and giving me some of your time, taking away from all your amazing things that you do. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
As you could have told from the intro, and as well as if you've maybe watched some episodes, this show is all about roasting people that should know better but aren't doing better. But to keep things balanced, I like to start the show with a little segment called Sharpest Tool in the Shed. And today, the sharpest tool in the shed comes via LinkedIn. If I can just find it here on my spreadsheet. Oh, there we go. So today, sharpest. Okay, so maybe I should just say today, Rashné and I are going to be talking about ethics, recruitment, and marketing. And that might seem like an odd combination, but I promise you it'll make sense later on. So today's sharpest tool in the shed is a person by the name of Jeloni W. She brands herself as Jeloni or Jeloni W on LinkedIn. She is a technical talent acquisition specialist. And so the reason why she is the sharpest tool in the shed today is because she found a tweet. So she screenshotted the tweet by a person by the name Nikhil Krishnan. He's actually verified on Twitter. I suppose people should know who he is. I don't know who he is. Nikhil Krishnan. I don't know. I'm probably butchering that name. Anyway, so his tweet is as follows, and I'll put it in somewhere here. Cover letters are basically a way to tell if someone is applying to dozens of actually cares about yours. Now I'm just going to click back to my recording to see Rashni's facial expression because the level of audacity and entitlement that statement, like this is to see if they're applying for other jobs or just me. It's like, can you not? So Oni puts this much nicer than I do because she says, "I saw this Twitter post this morning, and I would like to a conversation. Personally, I can't stand cover letters. This isn't coming from recruiter Jeloni. It is coming from candidate Jeloni. I'm not about to write your company a love letter. It's like the document version of putting on a fake happy voice. I just feel like they're more fluff than anything. If you need to explain some gaps in employment, sure, that's a good place to put it in. But is having one really necessary? Let's talk about it. If I'm being honest, I think I've probably wrote one cover letter in my whole life. And who isn't applying for multiple jobs anyway nowadays? If it was up to me, I would do away with cover letters as a whole. And honestly, as a recruiter, I don't even want candidates submitting a cover letter to prove loyalty. I much prefer you apply for a job you want and have the skills for it. I know some roles industries require a cover letter, and that's understandable. A friend of mine says that every job she has applied for requires a cover letter. And the funny part is that the jobs aren't like VP or director level positions. This is just me and how I feel about them. But y'all know I love hearing everybody's input. So she puts it much more diplomatic than I feel about it. When I say statements like recruiters thinking they're they're doing the bare minimum of a recruiter's job is somehow doing society this massive favor. Makes me homicidal. What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Limki?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it's the flip side of what it is that we kind of want to, in general, talk about, which is this notion of personal branding. And the flip side of that is kind of the employer brand and, you know, their value propositions and all of that. And I think all of these, whether it's personal branding or employer brand or whatever it is, both of them ultimately try to distract you from the fact that this is an employment relationship that you are forced into because you have to work. And ultimately, I would suggest that
because you have to eat.
Precisely. And in most cases, I think employers are more replaceable. You know, one employer is nearly as good as another, more so than employees. And I think this is why I would, again, it depends on what kind of position you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera. But I actually think cover letters can be useful, partly to figure out if the person is genuine, not necessarily genuinely interested in your job or in your organization, but just a genuine person. And it perhaps gives you a better sense of who they are beyond their skills, because skills can be packaged in, you know, in a variety of ways, but you're not working with skills, you're working with people. And I would much rather get a sense of, you know, is this person somebody that I would be happy to sort of spend nearly kind of a third of my day with, right? Do I want to be in the same space as this person?
Fair enough.
So
fair enough. And I must say that I detest cover letters, and that is coming from also both being on the applicant and on the recruiter's side. I detest cover letters. What the thing that is standing out here, and the thing that triggers me, is this kind of you should suck my dick for even considering your application. That part I'm going to bleep out. But you know what I mean?
It's like, no.
You're like, everybody needs to work. Everybody needs to earn a salary just to live, because that's the society that we live in. Your job is really not doing society a massive favor. So can you get over yourself, please? This idea that, you know, applicants should be loyal to your brand before you've even, you know, seen them for an interview. Like, come on.
But can I say something there? And you can edit this out if you want to. But this is also why, you know, I kind of teach in a business school, and I teach management. And, you know, one aspect that you have to teach, and is the most common in the context of kind of HR teaching, is human relations. And one of the things that I kind of insist on when I teach human relations is just how much of a power play human relations also is, right? So ultimately, it's the notion that the employer is an extension of your family, that work is an extension, or is, you know, is a part of your life. There is no separation, and therefore, you know, you live your life, you experience what it is to live as much through the workplace as you do beyond it, which is utter rubbish. But I think, I mean, when I think about my students, I think a lot of them have bought into that idea that living happens through work, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And this kind of bullshit just kind of normalizes that.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you meet someone new, what's the first thing you ask them?
Yeah, what do you
do? So what do you do? Which is code for, you know, who are you? What is your identity? What are you about? It's kind of, we've all drank the Kool-Aid. I mean, I do it. Like, almost involuntarily. It's like the first thing you do, like, or, your friends dating someone new. Oh, okay. What's the situation and what do they do? You know what I mean? It's like, it's just how we operate now.
Yeah. It's also why, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's also why whenever I write my bio, I kind of say things like, I'm employed at, or I used to say before I had residency, I used to say my visa status is currently insured by the university of whatever,
Shady!
Girl, the shade of it all.
Because, I am not a lecturer, these are my employers. They serve a particular purpose in my life. But
see,
anyway.
I'm kind of like in the middle there because I see my profession as part of my identity. So I will say I am an IO psychologist, right? Because that's part of my identity. But I would never say like the fact that I'm principal psychologist at LBVC. No, I would never say that. But I will say that I'm you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So in sum, Jeloni, I'm sorry for butchering your name. You're the sharpest tool in the shade. Thanks for calling shade on this abuse of power nonsense. And Nikhil Krishnan, I don't really want to hear your opinion on this. Jeloni is being very nice that she wants to start a conversation. I don't. So next, I have quite a few pieces of stuff that I got together before the episode started because as I live on the internet, as you probably know. So as I see stuff, I just copy and paste the links into my spreadsheet because I'm all about that organization. And so I have a few things to share with you, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it. And so where we had the sharpest tool in the shed, who was calling buffoonery on the sort of general practices and this idea that candidates owe recruiters something. We also have the flip side of that, where people like, let me see. Okay, I can't share my screen with, I probably can share my screen with you, but I'm not. I'm just going to read it to you. Also on LinkedIn, proudly South African. So she is South African and she uses the unicorn emoji. So I think she's family. But other than that, I'm not messing with this person. Her name is Lucia V. What is it with? Is this a thing now? Recruiters not having a surname? Because I just noticed that the other one is W and this one is V. Like, are you trying to do share vibes? Anyway, so she goes off on a tangent in this post. Wait, no, I have to share it with you because the capitalization and all of that mess is part of this. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Still loading.
Loading?
Yeah. Do you want to share the link with me? Oh, there you go. Got it.
Okay, cool. So, what not to inbox a recruiter, ellipse. Dear Lucia, can you please have a look at my profile and see if I am suitable for any of your current positions? Big no! Exclamation. Rather, dear Lucia, I see that you have advertised X position. I have experience in X and would like to submit my application for this position. Or if there are no current positions available that you're suited for, dear Lucia, note that I have blah 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 and note blah 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 blah. See, yes, she's giving some good advice here, but I'm not feeling the tone. Like, yeah, sure, this is good advice for maybe a young job seeker who doesn't have a lot of experience, etc. But it's dripping in entitlement, and I'm not here for that. Thoughts?
I'm curious how people responded to this post. Were there negative
Luckily,
responses?
it is an actual post. Let's see. If I may, well, respectfully, you know the shade is coming.
Yeah.
Recruiters have a reputation for treating candidates as commodities and not as individuals. I think the above echoes that stereotype. Thanks, Vince. You are saying what we are all thinking. Candidates can be clients, and building relationships can not only aid you in your networking and talent pools, but also help your personal brand as a recruiter. A brief interaction with general career job seeking advice can go a long way, even if there's. Okay, so let's see. Lucia said to that 100%, some do, but perhaps rather say some recruiters. Oh, this is giving me not all men, white
Yeah.
lives matter. Lucia, you are awful. And then Vince continues to say, I understand what you mean. I'm referring to the already out there generalization. It's like, Lucia, this is not about you, you know? Ugh,
So,
ugh.
in some ways, I have a certain degree of sympathy with her. I mean, I obviously don't know what her day-to-day looks like and what her inbox looks like, etc. And
Right.
I can completely imagine that there are people that contact recruiters with a sense of entitlement, and that could be a response to it. And at the same time, I think, when you work, especially in this kind of world where you're constantly in communication with people, I think you have to be open to different people communicating differently, rather than kind of standardizing what to do and what not to do. And because ultimately, those kinds of markers are intended to make their job easier, right? Like, you can weed people out because they haven't emailed you correctly, or haven't used the right language, or whatever it might be. And of course,
Yeah,
there's
so
all
don't
kinds of
pretend
issues there.
yeah, don't pretend it's like about the candidate.
Yeah.
It's about you spending less time per CV. In other words, you churning out more applications per client, more money for you. So don't pretend it's about the applicant.
Yeah, and if you kind of feel overwhelmed by people contacting you, you could say, look, this is really overwhelming. I understand that that everyone kind of needs a job and is looking, but this is kind of what I can deal with, and this is what I can't deal with. So center yourself rather than blaming the other, right? Kind of talk about your capacities and the limits of what you can and cannot do, rather than saying, if you do this right, you're worth my time.
Exactly. And also another thing another reason why I found it so triggering is because I've spent a significant amount of time on working with youth in South Africa, specifically like undereducated or underexperienced youth, because we have a massive unemployment problem in South Africa, especially amongst youth. And I found that such a large part of my job in those roles have been towards sterilizing this individual to a point where they are indistinguishable from other people. Like, say this, don't say that. Write this, don't write that. Look this way, don't look that way. And to a point, it's got utility because certain things aren't okay, that you might not know if you haven't been employed before or whatever, or you haven't had access to certain education before. But I find it so dehumanizing, so dehumanizing. And then when a recruiter goes on a LinkedIn rant like that, it just leaves a very bad taste in my mouth. Oh,
Can I add something to that?
yeah,
I
sure.
mean, this is obviously all speculation now, right? But I can also imagine that this is a person trying to build their brand. So precisely because you were saying, for instance, that, for young people who are just entering the job market, who are looking for people that are going to be able to help them, a post like that could appear to be kind of disciplining, right? They might kind of go, oh my God, I've been doing this wrong all the time. Here's somebody worth paying attention to because they obviously have experience. And, you know, if you kind of create that sense, then you ultimately kind of become a quote unquote stronger brand. And arguably the first person that you mentioned, so the sharpest tool in the shed, that person, also, you know, that's kind of a different way of approaching it, right? It's a different kind of persona that you project. But this is why, like, all of this stuff around social media and recruiting is just so
gross,
complex. Well, complex, let's just say complex. Because ultimately we are all operating in a context in which people need jobs. There are particular conditions under which you become more or less visible in the job market. Social media exacerbates that substantially. And, you know, it's all well and good to say, well, I'm not going to play the game. And to an extent, that's possible. But a lot of people choose to or have to choose to play the game. I think if you kind of moralize the game, then that's a different issue. If you kind of start making it, you know, adding or ascribing value to it. But
yes, no, 100%. But like both of us work extensively in the equality, diversity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion space. I think so. For both of us, I think. Well, I suppose I can't really speak a whole white man speaking on a woman of color's behalf. I think what is really upsetting in these instances is just in my view, it's an abuse of power. It really is. You are a gatekeeper. You are gatekeeping a opportunity for someone to live. Let's face it. If you don't work, you don't live, because then you're at the mercy of the state or family or whatever the case might be. And you're gatekeeping someone's ability to live. And I would argue if you're the kind of person who just sends a recruiter, because I know what a good application should look like. I'm not disagreeing with what is her name, Lucia, whatever her name is. Not disagreeing with the content of what she's saying. Like, yes, do you have any jobs for me? Is probably not the best approach. What I'm concerned with is just her apparent, as you say, her scripting to people what would be the best way to approach her to get access to what she's gatekeeping. It's just gross. It's just honestly, it's just gross. So right. Do you want to see other responses?
Sure.
Oh yes. Let's do some more responses. I didn't even think of that. People doing my job for me. Wait, her name is Lucia. Okay, cool. So that was Vince. Vince was not having it. Then let's look at okay, can you see?
Mm-hmm.
The loading.
Yeah, no, I can see.
Okay, so Caitlin van der Merwe, so she is definitely South African. You can tell from the last name. She's one of my people. Let's see what she says. This touches on a huge misconception most job seekers have about recruiters. Oh, okay. So wait. Looks like Miss Caitlin is in Lucia's camp. Simply put, the purpose of a recruiter is not to find people jobs. It is to fill jobs. Harsh but true. What does that mean?
I think it means that recruiters don't work for candidates, they work for employers. So they really don't owe anything to potential candidates.
Well, duh. We don't. Okay, now Godwin Murerwa, he's also from South Africa. We don't look for jobs for people, but we look for people for jobs. What is going on? I don't understand what any of these things mean. it's the distinction is subtle, but it makes all of the difference in how recruiters are perceived. I got so tired of this misconception when I was still in an agency that I wrote an article rant. Oh, okay. I'm not even gonna, because I'm thinking that this is gonna be exactly the same as it's like Caitlin and Lucia. This is your job. It's like a physicist getting annoyed because gravity is interfering with his experiments. This is your job.
But it's also
Like,
such an absurdity, right? Because it doesn't sound like the initial post was about sort of suggesting that people were contacting the original poster, asking them to find the person a job. It was more, here's who I am. Do you find, like, is there something that might fit my profile? Which is precisely finding people for a job. So in any case, this is, yeah.
also, yeah, can I just show you something, right? So I received a message, and yes, this is maybe a bit different because this is about, I'm not a recruiter. I mean, I've been in the recruiter position before. But if you look at this person, Priya sent me a message just randomly, don't know her. She sent me a message. Hey, I came across your profile and found it very informative. I'm an applied psychology student. And then she had some questions about job opportunities and yada, yada, yada. And then I was like, yeah, thanks for your message. This sounds great. And okay, if you're a recruiter, you probably get hundreds of these. But why can't you just write a script like this, copy and paste, and then you've got some links, and I shared some links with her. And, why can't you just do that? No problem. Good luck. Why can't you do that? It'll take literally 5 seconds out of your life.
I mean, I suspect that there's also something, academics do this all the time in a particular way. There was something recently doing the rounds on social media, on Twitter specifically, about an academic in the US, I think, who posted something about, graduate students contacting them and asking them for advice. And the person said, I charge people. If you want my time, I'm going to charge you. And on the one hand, that kind of goes with this idea of like, we're constantly being called on to do unpaid work, and we shouldn't open ourselves up to that. But at the same time, like, there is, I think the line between kind of supporting people versus just supporting people because that's how you build people and build strength and build community, versus supporting people because it's part of your job, that becomes or it has become such a fine line. And what I see here is people trying to kind of, demarcate precisely what a recruiter should do and shouldn't do, right? The same way that people debate what the role of an academic is and isn't. And I think that's likely a consequence of the fact that, one, this line between work and life has for so long been so blurred that we've kind of lost any sense of being able to disentangle sort of our responsibility to our employer or whoever it is that pays us. And there we definitely shouldn't be doing unpaid labor, although we're all guilty of doing it, or most of us are. And then the work you do because you live in a society that functions in a particular way. And either you want to kind of be in community with people or you don't. And, ultimately that's your choice. But if a person comes to you because, they're hoping that you will be able to help them navigate a really shitty world, you can either choose to say, well, I'm not paid for that, or you can choose to say, yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure this out too, so let me share with you what I've, the things that I've learned.
Yeah, and I suppose I don't. I don't know. Maybe it's just the tone that doesn't sit right with me, because I will never expect from anyone to do unpaid work. Okay, even if you're getting a big salary, or if you're getting an entry level salary, I will, because I'm a IO psychologist, and I know about burnout and all of these things. So I would never expect someone to do unpaid work. Um, so I think, even
But
if her message was
Cliff,
exactly the same, yes.
here we are, both doing unpaid labor.
Yes, but it's for myself, though. It's not for someone else. You are doing it
True.
for someone else. You are doing it
True.
for someone else. But
But you're not just, if we just wanted to have a conversation, we wouldn't need to record it and put it out,
record it
right? You
and
are
edit
doing
it.
it for yourself, but you're doing it and edit it. Yeah. Like all of that is unpaid work that you are doing in order to position yourself in the world of work in a particular way. This is unpaid labor. Like there is
Yeah.
and it is a consequence of the context of work that we live in. So there's like zero shade there. But
Well,
that's
shade
kind of,
towards the system, the
yeah,
broken system.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm participating in the European something development something. I should probably know. Wait, let me plug that. Oh, this episode is going to be come out like long after the conference. Anyway, so some development conference in the coming week, and in my capacity as a provocateur. So I'm provoking people with a short video where I essentially say, within a capitalist system, organizations are inherently toxic. You can tell me that you've got employee assistance programs, and you promote women in leadership, and you have all these wonderful things like workplace balance and assistance for young parents, or any of these wonderful things. These things are patches on a ship full of holes that are sinking. Okay, don't. And it was and my message is targeted towards leaders who are key decision makers and have an influence on how these things manifest in the organization. And it the reason for this provoking thought is not so that you now have to abandon all equality and diversity efforts, but to better understand that they don't define the works the work context. The work context, these are compensatory actions. They are not inherent to the work context. The work context within a capitalist society or structure or economic whatever system is toxic, because it cannot function without exploitation. And we need to, because a lot of the equality and diversity discourse kind of romanticizes this idea of like a Google, that has work-life balance, and oh, if we could just achieve that, our organization would be wonderful. It would be a magical space to be in for 8 hours a day. But it's really surface level, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't being forced indirectly. What a lovely thought.
Have you seen this clip or TikTok or whatever? I'll share it with you. I'll find it later and share it with you. But the line in it simply is, I do not have a dream job, for I do not dream of labor.
I do not dream of labor. I think it's from Paris is Burning. Might be.
Yeah, maybe.
It sounds very LGBT.
Yeah, and and I think like different people have kind of done sort of takes on that. But I think
do not
it's
dream of
so
labor. Yeah.
it's so spot on. The notion that we've constructed this whole thing about, if you love what you do, you're not going to work a day in your life. Bullshit. Like
Bullshit.
yeah,
At the same time, there one study comes to mind. I'll put it in here somewhere when I'm editing and I remember what it's from. But basically, what it was is I think it was a socialist experiment. They did it in Canada, and there was a town. They randomly selected a town, and when I say they, probably the research team. I don't know which university they were affiliated with, but anyway, basically what it was is everyone in the town were told, you live in this town. If you live in this town, you will get a certain salary, certain minimum salary. No one can take this away from you. Nothing you can do can earn it. Nothing you can do can make someone take it away from you. And they wanted to see what happened. And apparently the results were great. People didn't like stop going to work. It was still a functioning society, but without the you know, fear of discipline if you don't show up for work. Because the capitalist society has this assumption that if we don't force people with discipline or entice them with incentives, they're not going to come to work and society will collapse. Basically, what that study found was that is completely flawed. We will still function as a society.
And I think it's super important also to remember like that the history of capital is like really, really. So when we talk about going to work right now or working right now, what we're talking about is working for capital, right? Working for an employer.
Selling your labor.
Yeah, precisely.
Selling your labor for, yeah.
But when you kind of talk about the end of work or the abolition of work, you're not talking about, you know, people not still engaging in activity that builds the world,
society.
Right? So quote unquote productive activity, but not necessarily economically productive in the context of producing value for capital. Forget that. And I think that's such an important, and you know, when I teach around this, like my students kind of go, what do you mean a workless society? You know, like I don't want to not be working, you know, I don't want to be a lazy person. But that's because so much of...
You drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But it's this false dichotomy. It's this false dichotomy. If either I sell my labor for capital to the capitalists, or we live in a post-apocalyptic world where people eat each other. Like, it's not; those aren't the only two options.
Exactly, and they haven't been. I mean, in human history, they haven't been the only two options. So
I think, probably. Well, I mean, I'm dumbing down a very complex situation, but possibly I want to posit that the reason we see things like that first post, was it by Nikhil? How do you say this name, Rashné? Nikhil. Nikhil. The reason why we see people like cover letters is to show if people are loyal, blah blah blah, and this other recruiter person is because we think that the only reason why people work can only be for capital. We are incapable of seeing or understanding work for society. Like having a functional society. So we are incapable of envisioning a world where we don't work so that we can just eat, but so that everyone can eat, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of that has to do with fear, and the fear that if I don't work for money to eat, I will die. So I don't have bandwidth to think of any other permutations of work.
And I think
that's depressing.
And I think this is also, you know, so if I wanted to be harsh, I would say it's a historically ignorant position, right? So you only can imagine the world through what it is that you've known. If I want to be kinder than that, I would say, you know, this is the amazing thing that capital has done, which is kind of insist to us and convince us that, you know, it has been responsible for all kinds of progress in the world. So everything that we kind of value today is a consequence of capital, right?
I saw that. I've seen that do the rounds, and it is such a lie. It is such a fucking lie, like a blatant lie. It has no base in fact. Like the big advances in recent history has been either just cause, like if you think of Nikola Tesla, I mean, I can't think of anyone else right now, but it has just been cause I want to design this, so I will, or government funded. It's not been because of capital.
It hasn't. And I think, I used to occasionally kind of teach this case of a person in India that essentially created a machine or a production process to produce like a very basic product, which is sanitary napkins for women. So accessible, sustainable, economically accessible, financially accessible, sustainable sanitary napkins. And he did it purely because he noticed the struggle that his wife was having around her period, right? And it was purely kind of out of interest and obviously motivation, but there was no kind of intent to innovate for capital in that endeavor, right? And this person only is to an extent globally visible. So he has a TED talk. I can't remember his name, but he has a TED talk about this, because he's kind of been able to do something that's quite outstanding, right? But this kind of person, precisely because he's, pretty kind of working class, rural, etc., like would never be recognized as somebody that has talent, right? Like this isn't even necessarily a person that's ever going to be, regardless of what language they use, is never going to be in that person's inbox, right? And yet we kind of create all of these narratives around, the right kind of people have the right kinds of education, that they have the right kind of skills, that they have the right ways of communicating. It's just a self-perpetuating myth. That's all it is.
I mean, if anything, we should give capitalism a Nobel Prize for the best like
PR.
marketing campaign. I mean, it is incredible. It is incredible. And not just like the way it self-sustains itself without actually doing anything. Because people who sell their labor just as much as you and I do will defend capitalism's oppression of the masses. And it's like, you do realize you're being fucked as much as the rest of us, right? Like you maybe have a slightly better house, but that's pretty much it. Like
but it's like internalized sexism and internalized racism, right? You kind of hope that you're going to benefit from the system, that the system is finally really going to work for you.
Sorry. No. Computer says no. I actually saw a TikTok the other day of a physicist. Let me see if I can find it. And he's had it, right? He was over it. He couldn't deal with the fact that everything that he wants to do or want to achieve through his science has to make someone money or it can't happen. And so he I'm wondering if I can find it. I commented and I said I want to be involved. I want to help. No, it doesn't look like I saved it. But anyway, yeah, and I think a lot of people are waking up to this idea that we are being lied to, and the system is not only lying to us, but is it's turning us into liars about what the system can do for us and what we are responsible for to the system. So, what can mere mortals do about this other than being super entitled on LinkedIn about how people should apply to you? How can we How can we do better? Because I mean, sure, we can throw shade from dusk till dawn, but how are we better?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the biggest challenges around sort of wanting to lead a meaningful life, which is likely something that is innate, right? And kind of deriving meaning through work and kind of sort of disentangling those. I think one of the biggest challenges that I encounter in, just everyday life really, is that people don't really have much of a systemic analysis. So if they are suffering in their day-to-day, right, there is an entity that causes that suffering. And then it kind of becomes an individualized problem. That's an individual or kind of individualized source of the problem, rather than kind of saying, here is a system that's intended to do exactly what it is doing, and that people are trying their best. And if you want to be generous, people are trying their best to kind of figure out how to operate in the system without causing the least harm. Ideally, I mean, obviously, some people buy into the system and they, choose to cause a lot of harm. But I think if you kind of have a systemic analysis, then it actually allows you to work against the system even while you're working within it, or having to work in it, having no choice other than to work in it. So I think, for instance, when you spoke about the EDI stuff, right? I do EDI work in an academic context.
That is very much anti-EDI.
That is not just I mean, the university is fundamentally, there's all of this stuff about like decolonizing the curriculum and decolonizing the university. And I'm kind of very upfront about the fact that, if you're talking about decolonization, you're actually talking about the abolition of the university as we know it. Like there's there's nothing else.
Yep.
And yet there are things that you can do to make people's lives easier and safer within the university, because the university is an incredibly unsafe place for a lot of people, precisely because of racial power, gendered power, etc. Yeah. And you do EDI work not because it is going to make the system safer. You're doing it so that in the day-to-day, people are suffering less, right? But you can continue to have a systemic analysis and say the system can't exist. Like, I am still going to do the work of trying to dismantle the system, which is not going to happen from within the system. Like, I'm not making any of those kinds of arguments. That's a different project. It happens at a different time and different place. And what I do within the system is to try and blunt its edges. That's all I can literally do.
How do we translate that from academic speak into what can I actually do in my life as let's take the example of a recruiter. How can I be a less shitty recruiter?
So I think you can kind of definitely understand the context in which you're recruiting, which is one where people are desperate for jobs. And that your role is to essentially try to make that process hopefully a little bit safer, more accessible, more open to people. And at the same time, kind of not moralize your work as, opening up the system and making it accessible and all of that, right?
That is right, yeah.
You have to work within the system. I get it. We all have to do it. But you don't need to kind of identify with it just because of whatever your role in it is. So I think, again, sort of, I don't know if like systemic analysis is too academic, but I think actually understand.
No, I mean, it's.
I mean, everything we've been talking about so far has been systemic, right? So the minute you talk about capital and all of that, it's systemic. So.
It's easy to understand. I just don't know how. I mean, because I struggle with it, and I'm smart. people's actual ability to do it. So it's easy to understand, yeah, the system is oppressive, and the things that we see in day-to-day life isn't problems in itself. It's symptomatic of a systemic problem. But how to actually, it's easy to understand in concept, but how to address that practically is probably a bit more difficult.
But I guess that's where the kind of the ethics sort of comes in, right? Which is your decision about how you want to act or respond to individuals
Within the
where all of you are trapped in the same system. And to me, that's fundamentally an ethical question. How do I want to relate to you? Or how do I not want to relate to you? And this is also why people kind of then say, well, this is all kind of really, it's all fluff. It's not, but it's very easy to dismiss as fluff because it's really hard.
It's really hard to pin down and to grasp and to make something of it. So that was that was heavy. But I did not
you
think
knew
that
what you were getting.
I knew this is not going to be a light conversation. Few conversations you are very light. No, but it's good because we need to have these conversations. And we are hitting the 50-minute mark, and I tend to not cut out anything. I want to keep it fresh. I only mute my swear words, but otherwise I keep it pretty much in. So to make it digestible, I don't want to go over an hour. So, Dr. Limki, what would you like to leave my two listeners? Well, two is a bit, generous. What would you like to leave my one listener with?
There is a difference between trying to make it in the system and trying to make the system work for you.
Okay. Are we going to elaborate on that, or are we going to leave it as
No.
nice and cryptic like that?
It's not.
Open
It's
to
not
interpretation.
cryptic.
No, I mean, no, it is. No. Okay, well, that was very nice. I just say thanks for joining me, and make sure to listen to the next episode. And until then, don't be a management tool. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time, and your insight, as always, was fantastic. And I will, I don't know, see you soon on WhatsApp, I suppose.